One of the most common struggles in marriage today is when discussions turn into heated conflict, losing our temper, and then doing and saying things we don't mean in a tone we don't like. On today's episode, we're joined by Heather Holmgren, a marriage and family therapist who shares some timely tips on the lost art of listening. From listening and seeking real understanding to regulating and co-regulating our emotions, Heather offers real help to couples wanting things to go better, but just don't know where to start. Heather Holmgren is a licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Simple Modern Therapy. She's spent 20 years understanding modern relationships. Her core belief, self-happiness is crucial for successful relationships. Heather leads a team of 8 therapists in Salt Lake City, offering in-person and virtual support to individuals, couples, and families with expertise in LGBTQIA+ care. Passionate about professional mentorship, she supervises clinicians and advocates for mental hygiene and speaks on relationship issues for various platforms. We hope you enjoy the show. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast. We're glad you're here with us. We're glad to be with you. My name's Dr. Dave. I'm here at USU Extension, a family life professor, alongside our family therapist, Dr. Liz Hale. We're striving to bring you the very best we have in research and resources, along with some tips and tools to help you create the marriage of your dreams. Okay. Far too many couples get into heated arguments and fail to control their temper, their tongue, their tone of voice, making it near impossible to really understand their partner's world. So today, we're taking a deep dive in how to listen to understand, emotionally regulate, and co-regulate more effectively so we can show up in misunderstandings and conflict much better. Heather Holmgren is a therapist in Salt Lake City and founder of Simple Modern Therapy. Thanks for joining us, Heather, and welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Heather, big picture. Can you first start by telling us a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to found Simple Modern Therapy?
Yeah, you bet. I've been in practice for about 20 years. I am a marriage and family therapist. So I've always been really interested in relationships, how we interact with each other, why we do what we do, and what healthy relationships and healthy engagement look like, and how our mental health plays into that. And about 10 years ago, I recognized as a big supporter of the LGBTQIA community and queer identified myself that there wasn't anyone in the area that was actively advertising relationship-based work with the LGBTQIA community. So that is why I decided to start Simple Modern Therapy. And as a result, I've had other people reach out and say, I think maybe our perspectives are aligned. I'm a transplant to Utah. I'm maybe dealing with a faith crisis. I feel like maybe I'm just living out on the outsides of the margins of the culture. Would you work with me? So now we say we work with everyone else in Utah, but really we just love people. We love promoting relational and mental wellness. And yeah, that's me and Simple Modern in a nutshell.
Love it. Love it. Thank you.
That's very well named, Heather. Simple Modern. Now I understand. And I'm so glad when therapists who are talented like you recognize the dearth, right, of services, and you fill that void and that need. So we're so glad you're here doing that. Over these 20 years, I'm curious, what changes have you seen in the dynamics of modern relationships?
Oh, that's such a good question, Liz. I feel like we've become more distracted. People have a lot going on. I wasn't born into the age of the internet that developed as I grew, and so I've seen, cell phones and our access to technology change. And it feels like it's created this great distance between people, and even living in the same home, a distance in relationships. So I would say that's one of the bigger things that have changed. I also think that there's a lot of demands on men to be more emotionally expressive, to be available with their families, to be able to do kinds of things that maybe society didn't put the same amount of pressure. There's pressure on other things, of course, but the same amount of pressure. So I've seen changes in expectations for men and women shift over time.
Have you ever heard the term technoference, Heather? We've had that. We've talked about that a little bit here on Stronger Marriage Connection. Just the interference of technology into romantic relationships was coined about a dozen years ago from an excellent researcher. So you're so right. Devices are dividing us more than bringing us together. I guess they can do both, right? It really is up to us.
That's right. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, we're doing this podcast, which is another
That's
thing.
right. That's right. Good things happen.
Here we are doing the thing. And yeah, the intention is bring people closer together. And yeah, you have to be intentional with it.
Has the power to do that, one or the other. Yeah, for better, for worse. Well said.
Yeah, you mentioned mental health. I like to say that a happy, healthy we starts with a happy, healthy me. So before we dive into the lost art of listening, tell us your thoughts about personal mental hygiene and making sure we're in a good spot personally so we can bring our very best self to the relationship.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate for mental hygiene practices, and just like, thinking about taking care of your physical health on a regular basis, doing things like showering, brushing your teeth, going to doctor's appointments, getting enough sleep is really important to your physical health. Acknowledging how you're feeling, being able to name the emotion, being able to identify where it exists in your body, doing things that can help titrate the emotional resourcing that we have in order to be able to engage in our day with people in a way that feels effective and where we can maintain a sense of inner calm. We can be really good at that when we are practicing every day these kinds of heightened awareness, these kinds of like behaviors and interventions that help us keep our mental health stable and our mood regulated.
It seems like now more than ever, right? That this is needed. You hear like the mental health struggle and crises, and I don't know, part of it maybe, all kinds of causes, and we can get into that as far as, technology and all these other things that are these pressures that are coming. But I think we all align on that mental health is crucial for relational health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about how much, I know we're sort of on the technology thread, but how much numbing has become a part of our normal way of being. We'll do things that are very stressful. We'll engage in a life that's pretty chaotic. And then we go to numb to release that. And that looks like watching a lot of television or, being on our phones, drinking alcohol, overeating, and being able to really ask oneself, where am I right now? How am I feeling? What do I need today? Because I've just done all of these stressful things, or I know that there's a lot going on, is pretty magical in helping a person and helping me, someone who engages in these kinds of practices, really live a vibrant life and be present in it.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
It's interesting, Heather and Dave, just how that critical mind is such a detriment to relationships, right? My own critical mind, what I'm saying about myself, clearly what I'm saying about my partner as well, but even just starting with self, being able to really quiet that inner critic. It's so loud and it doesn't do anything for me in my connection to others. Do you have any thoughts about that, Heather, or tips or tools about that critical voice?
Very well. First of all, I've never met anyone that doesn't have an inner critic. I don't know why they just become our constant companion in life. But I think that we sometimes develop this notion that a critical voice helps us be more exacting in our life or do something, do better, work harder, when actually the research doesn't support that at all. That self-compassion is that access point to really being able to get a lot of freedom to just tune our life towards something better. But it's not a natural practice to be in, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Such a good point that criticism doesn't pan out after all. Not like we thought it did, right? That I've got to be hard on myself. I can't give up, right? Got to keep pushing, keeping my foot on the gas, but self-compassion. Yeah. We need to do probably a whole segment on self-compassion. I need to know more about that myself.
Oh, I'm a huge fan. I am a huge fan. I think, Liz, this is kind of going back to that question you just asked. Sometimes when I talk to my clients, I tell them that, I think of shame, or I think of the self-critic or self-criticism as pond scum on top of a pond. And it's like, it's there. And like, we really want to see what's going on underneath. And until we can move that to the side, I mean, not, do away with it or say that it's bad or whatever, but to just move it to the side. Yeah, we can see what's really there and we can work with that. We can work with both things. But when we have the shame, the self-criticism, that's all we can see. That's all we can engage with. And it's really hard to do that deeper work.
Oh, I love that you said it to your clients. You're also, I know, Heather, a big proponent of about the lost art of listening. Oh my goodness. What's happened to genuine, true blue listening? Why do you think listening is such a critical skill in relationships? Clearly it is. And how can we improve? Like, what can we just do today to be better listeners?
Oh, Liz, that's a big question. I think that we've become a culture of talking heads, and that good communication is seen as being good at debate. I have a lot of attorneys that I work with that are really good at talking and really good at, quote unquote, winning an argument. But that skill of holding space for someone, of really taking their position and trying to understand, knowing you, it makes sense to me why you're expressing this, why you're feeling this way. And even like the skill of interpretation, getting underneath something and going, you're saying that you're mad at me because I didn't do the dishes. But what are we really talking about? That it's not about the dishes. It's about something else. And being able to do that, it's nuanced work. And I don't know that I didn't know how to do it until, I went to school, until I practiced a lot in my personal life, until I did a lot of reading. I don't think that we're teaching people how to do it. And I don't think we're teaching people how to do it effectively, or even, highlighting how important it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's key. It's key. I love what you said, like knowing you the way I do, knowing you, it makes sense to me that this would be upsetting. Knowing your heart.
Exactly. Yeah.
I never thought of that phrase. I like it though.
Yeah. It's a different way of examining something. Because often when we're in conflict, I don't know. I shouldn't say we, I should say me. When I'm in conflict, my reaction is, you've got to be kidding me. When my partner comes to me with a problem, oh no, we're not going here. Like, that is my first reaction is to say, I can't believe this is happening to me.
Your mortal response. Yes.
Yeah. And it isn't, hold up, what's going on? Knowing my partner, what are they trying to say to me?
Walk us through that a little bit, Heather. I mean, what happens inside of our brains, inside of our bodies when conflict happens? And when we get into these habits, it feels like early on, maybe even, from we see how our parents manage conflict, we grow up as teenagers, and then we get into these relationships, and there's these patterns, like real deep patterns of I get emotionally, charged and triggered, and then off to the races we go. What happens inside of us when we lose it? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good question.
But we know that there's a physiological and psychological response. The psychological response is our amygdala lights up, our midbrain starts going into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. The Gottmans call it flooding. We become emotionally dysregulated, and we're really going into that protective space. And our prefrontal cortex begins to shut down a little bit, the part of our brain that uses logic and reasoning, helps us think things through, say the right thing, do the right thing. And then those physiological responses that accompany those things can be like an increase in heart rate, shortness of breath, having a pit in the stomach, feelings of anxiety, throat constriction. We also know that there's like a hormonal component as well, that we get adrenaline going, and that it becomes much more difficult to manage the process, right? So then maybe we go back to the things that we know, how we saw our parents interact with each other, or maybe things are just truly reactive. I'm now in a fight space, or I am just going to turn away or shut down. But that's in a nutshell what's happening physiologically and psychologically to us when we're, I'm going to say, like, triggered in a conflict.
Mm-hmm. So off we go to the races. So the opposite of that, you've talked about emotional regulation and co-regulation, and how we, it's how critical it is in relationships and conflict, and these skills, being able to slow down. First, can you define for us? I mean, some people are like, what do you co-regulate? What is that? And can you break it down? Can you give us some practical tips? Now, I'm having a session with Heather. I'm really struggling maybe with my wife. What do you offer? So first, tell us a little bit about those terms, and then give us some practical.
Sure. So emotional regulation is our ability to notice when that spike is happening and to respond to that by getting our system calmer. And so this looks like, I think, the simplest, maybe the most practiced emotional regulation skill is deep breathing. And it's just breathing in and breathing out. And we know that this, if there's any polyvagal people listening out there, we know that this practice stimulates the vagus nerve, which presses down on a part of our brain that allows us to reset. So deep breathing is amazing. It's great. It's been around forever for a reason. But another one of those things that I mentioned is noticing your body. Just noticing is, if my throat is constricting, maybe I take a drink of water, of cold water, and I give myself a beat. That maybe is going to help with that. If I have that anxiety in my stomach, taking a deep breath might really help there. Even stretching, doing things that are like body opening versus body closing or tensing. And noticing, even if you were able to imagine the parts of your body that tense up when you're in a hostile environment or in a tense conversation, noticing that and allowing those to relax, noticing it and allowing it to relax can be a good way to emotionally regulate. These are just a few ideas. There's more out there on the internet, but that is an example of how you would emotionally regulate. And what it is just noticing when you're becoming escalated or flooded and being able to engage in a practice that allows you to get to a better state of calm or more emotionally resourced. Co-regulation is helping your partner do that. So you can imagine it would be really difficult if you aren't in a place to engage, at least at a certain baseline. But co-regulation would look like just touching your partner. Man, I have seen couples in the therapy room, when one reaches over to the other, is just like their whole body changes.
Yeah. For the better, usually, right? For the better.
For the better.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Co-regulation can look like just naming, I see that you're really upset. Or, ooh, something I say to my partner is, I want to have a conversation. I don't want to have a conflict. So just trying to do things to cue to your partner. It's okay to calm down. I'm not a threat. This doesn't have to be so hard. I'm here with you. I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so critical. And this is not easy, right? Because if it was easy, it would be like, oh, okay, I didn't know. Yeah, then I can let me just change. But it's like this process of catching, right? Noticing, being aware, taking the breaths, asking ourselves, okay, even naming it, being like, okay, man, I'm getting really worked up right now. I need a break for a minute, or I need to just step away and think about it before I say something that I regret. I call it learning to become a first responder rather than a nuclear reactor. And a first responder, right, notices and they pay attention, and then they can respond instead of just reacting like wildly from that. But this is a process, is it not?
It is. And it's like yoga. It's a practice. It's just about getting deeper in the pose, about trying again, about noticing how you're showing up today. I don't know if the Gottmans are the ideal. But we know that they fight because they talk about it all the time. And man, again, after 20 years, I am still really, really able to go at it with my partner. So yeah, I'm in the practice as well.
You bet. It's so honest of you. We're just mere mortals. I just think it's very easy to do that. Speaking of mere mortal, when I first heard about polyvagal, I was kind of halfway listening as I was wrapping up with a client who's a therapist, and she's talking about polyvagal. And I thought it was a person. I'm so embarrassed. I said, so polyvagal created, I was like, oh, good grief. Polyvagal is a nerve, right? It's a polyvagal nerve, right? Heather, is that how it is?
I don't know where the poly comes from. I've got to be honest with you.
So embarrassed. That's my, I couldn't believe I thought this was a human being. I just didn't know. Well, we'll both study it up because I would love to know a little bit more about that. But thank you for just hitting pause, right? I do remember that from John Gottman. I was asking him once at a conference, they said, who are these marriage masters? These occasionally studying the marriage disasters, he found these people that did it well. And I just said, what do they do? Do they have great childhoods? Do they have bad childhoods? And what was it? And he goes, we really don't know. But what they seem to do more than anything is they pause. They take a beat. They breathe before they respond. And I'll just never forget that. So clearly we're all mere mortals. We have unhealthy patterns. We have cycles of heated conflict. What else can we do when we find ourselves in a cycle like that, Heather?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, when we are in a state of dysregulation in the midst of conflict, the first thing we can do is, you said pause, tell our partners where we're at. Hey, I'm starting to get really worked up right now. Or I'm feeling myself begin to not be able to engage in a way that is good for me or good for us. The next thing is to take a break. And research shows that we need at least 20 minutes, but not longer than 24 hours to be able to get into a place of re-regulation and re-engage. What we need to do next as we're taking a break is get out of visual range of our partner, because we know the more they're there, the more we're looking at them, the more we're working up, we're replaying, we're reenacting. We need space. And then we need to do something that gets our mind off of the conflict. So can be putting together a grocery list or going on a walk or listening to something. But that active intention of trying to get our mind off of what just happened toward something else so that we can create that baseline is really important. Walking away and replaying and reliving is not going to do us any good. And then coming back when we have committed to re-engage in a conversation, hopefully different this time.
Mm-hmm. And if not, I guess we break again, right? I've been known to do that.
As often as it takes.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
But not more than 24 hours. I think that's such a good rule of thumb, because we both have had clients and Dave, you too, and in the field know of couples who part far longer, right? We go days without talking and all of the damage that causes. So I love your reminder, Heather, about, narrowing it to a day, ideally 20 minutes to an hour is my recommendation. Very good.
I love that. I think that what that sometimes allows us to do, at least for me, Heather, is that I'm able to try to see things from my wife's perspective, and I try to, listen past the edge and maybe her voice to a feeling or to a need that's being smothered by the outbursts and the emotion that I'm. What is it that's underlying this that I really need to try to understand and to have compassion and really listen? But it's like when I get, negativity literally narrows our brain. We know from the research, and it's hard for us to see another person's perspective or even to have compassion to try to truly understand and listen for that love and that understanding. How have you been able to, do you have examples applying these principles, or couples who've been in, gridlock or just going at it? And how have you been able to help them? Do you have any stories or examples?
Oh, I have a lot of stories. I have stories about clients and stories from my personal life and on. I think I do want to tell a story that I thought was so brilliant, that this couple was able to work this problem out, but and it has to do with gridlock. But I first want to say that research shows that most of the time, what we're really fighting about, and I mentioned it before, is it's nothing. We're fighting about the dishes. We're fighting about who's picking the kids up from school. We're fighting about where are my car keys for the 1,000th time. But what we're actually fighting about a lot of the time is things that we value, unrecognized needs, and hidden dreams. And if we can remember these things, values, unrecognized needs, and hidden dreams when our partner comes to us, that's how we can begin to go underneath and say, what are they really trying to say? So I'm thinking of a couple right now that they had this constant conflict every winter. And the conflict was the wife needed to take a car to Park City and took her kids with her. And as you know, if you're from Utah, Park City's really snowy. The weather can be a little on the fringes. And so every winter time, she would ask her husband to take his truck. And every year, this would be the most epic fight. It would cause so much tension to the point that they would just dread the winter. And on the part of the husband, his perspective was, every time you take my truck, something happens to it. It's you're calling me, you're at the side of the road, there's something wrong. Like, why don't you take care of my truck? And she would get so upset because, don't you care about me and the kids? All I want to do is get us there safely. Like, what is the big deal? I can't believe you're making such a big deal about your stupid, precious truck when really it's about me and the girls. And they would just fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. And when they were able to do the things we're talking about today, pause, take a step back, and really ask a lot of questions. Help me understand why, taking my truck is so important to you. Well, all I care about is getting me and the kids to Park City safely. That's all I want to do. And I worry about that every year. I worry about the weather. Husband takes a step back. Well, I want that too. I want you to get there safely. I want the kids to be there safe. So the real challenge was her getting this place of understanding, what is the big deal about the truck? Because that felt so insignificant to her. It was really upsetting. But she took a pause, took a step back, helped me understand, why do you get so upset about the truck? And as he started talking, he says, I work so hard and everything I do is for my family. I love you guys so much. I have one thing that's mine. It's a truck. And once she heard that, it was like, oh my gosh.
She got it.
I get it.
Oh.
I get it. Yeah. And a conflict that had gone on for years and years and years became a conversation about, let's buy a new car, honestly, was what it was. It was a crazy solution. But yeah. And I think that a lot of conflicts aren't really like that. Once we can take a step back and instead of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of X, Y, and Z, we go, help me understand why this is so important to you with a lot of sincerity. Then we can really get to the bottom of understanding our partner better, more, and understanding our partner, better, more often, and giving a little bit more space to be able to move through conflict.
That's a great example of truly seeking understanding and being like, oh, what this means to this person. Yeah, it's deeper than the truck, right? And her about the safety and the kids. So being able to truly see below the surface of the conflict, that just takes time, and sometimes a therapist or third party to point that out. A good friend of ours, Wally Goddard, once he's taught me for years all kinds of things. One thing he said that I'll never forget is irritation is an invitation. Irritation is an invitation for understanding. It's an invitation to pause. It's an invitation for compassion, to try to see the world through their eyes or through our children's eyes. And for that, that's helped me. When I start getting irritated, it's a signal to pause and try to see things from another person's view.
Yeah, I love that. I have in my own personal recognition that like defensiveness is my thing. If you want to be defended, if I mean, I am so good at it. I am so good at defensiveness. I don't mean to brag, but I've noticed every time I'm defensive, it's because I don't get it. I don't get what's happening. And so being more curious, trying to go for more understanding, that is such a good signal to me that I need to ask more questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if you still disagree, right? Because you can still disagree with somebody, but it's trying to, oh, I see why you would think that way, or I see why you're getting defensive, or I understand. Yeah, that's really good.
There has got to be more to this, right? I know, I love this man. Why he's so upset about something so simple, there's got to be a reason. I've got to dig deeper. Yeah, I love that. Love listening to you two go back and forth. You have quite the team of therapists there at Simple Modern Therapy, Heather, and we're neighbors. It's so fun to know where you are. I'm going to be looking for your building and inviting you to lunch. You have a lot of additional training, these therapists. It sounds so cool. What are some of the specialized areas that you help individuals and couples with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we all do relationship work, and that can look like people who are navigating the potential of breakup or divorce, people who are dealing with some aspect of betrayal in their life, challenges in relationships where one partner is struggling with addiction, and some of this day-to-day life transition, life crisis components. We also do work around prenatal and perinatal care with women and in relationships. So we work with trauma. We do men's mental health. We have an amazing male therapist on staff that is just incredible. And we work with people where also one person is neurodivergent. And then, of course, all of the components of the LGBTQIA plus relationships and faith transition and faith crisis. So we have this like well-rounded little crew. And I am so lucky to work with so many skilled therapists. Every single one of them I would refer a family member or friend to. And so I've never worked in a place where I've been able to say that. And I'm so proud.
You should be so proud. That's quite a compliment. Where can listeners find out more about you and Simple Modern Therapy and the resources you offer? How easily can they find you? I want them to be able to get to you, Heather.
Well, I am clowning on Instagram at Simple Modern Therapy. And they can also find us on our website, www.simplemodern.org.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll put those in our show notes for our listeners as well, Heather. So thank you for sharing more about you and your resources. Before we let you go, we like to ask all of our guests a couple of questions. The first one is, what do you feel is the key to a stronger marriage connection?
Generosity and kindness. I think it's simple. I think it's really, really simple.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I do. I love that Gottman has talked about. Yes. Being generous, being kind. Absolutely love that. What about a takeaway of the day? Is there a message that you want our listeners to remember from our discussion today? What would that be?
The more aware you are of where you are emotionally, what kind of outside stressors are impacting your mental health and mood can really be a big factor in how you're showing up in your relationship. So take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. It's not selfish. It is self-care. And that helps us be much more effective in our relationships. And, secondarily, I feel like I have to say that listening is an art. And if we think we're good at communicating, we have to ask ourselves, how good am I at really listening to understand, at relationally attuning?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Heather. Liz, what about you? What's
Sorry,
your takeaway today?
I had to grab something.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
I had to grab something. I forgot about these, but I'm so glad we're talking about listening today because I had these big ears that I've had for years in my practice. And they're there in the closet. But you know what? Sometimes, honest to goodness, sometimes I think about these, even if I don't get them out, I just think like, I am not hearing this person very well, whether it's a client or this my partner or another family member. I want to, we've got two of these, right? Two ears and one mouth. Just thinking about, speaking of being generous and kind, I think listening is one of the more generous and kindest things that we can do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It looks like Dumbo, huh? Dave, what about you? What's your biggest takeaway with our time with Heather Holmgren today?
Yeah, Heather, I think it's when you're talking about the pause, I just think that there's a power in the pause. The power in the pause to be able to not react, to be able to, it gives us at least a chance. Pause, take a breath, allow our hearts, our minds, our brains to be able to, okay, I'm going to reflect and respond instead of react right now. And you know what, listeners, you're going to blow it. I blow it all the time. It's a process. Be patient with the pause in the process because you got to be gentle with yourself, and we're going to lose it again with our children, with a spouse or partner. But there is a real power in a pause. And when you do pause, celebrate it and be like, oh, I caught myself, and celebrate the heck out of it, because that then cements it in the brain and says, hey, it rewards you. You did it. You didn't follow this cycle, this automatic reaction, but you're creating new connections in your brain that allow you to pause instead of react. So Heather, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Stronger Marriage Connection podcast.
No, it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
All right, my friends, that does it for us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And remember, it's small things often that create a stronger marriage connection. Take good care now.
We'll see you. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.